Hey, I'm Taylor Dorsett, and this is the Professional Technical Interviewee. Technical interviews are hard, and every company does them differently. On this show, I interview engineering leaders to see what they look for in technical candidates, and then they perform a real technical interview with me. My guest today is Randy Burgess. He's currently the VP of Technology at MPI Media Group. Previously, he worked as a senior engineering manager at Shipwell and Hireoogy, as well as a coding bootcamp instructor at Northwestern University. Randy shares his non-traditional approach for interviewing technical candidates, shares tips for overcoming interview anxiety, and we talk about a number of other interesting interview-related topics. Well, welcome back. I guess the ball is now in your court. Randy, I'd love to move into the technical assessment, technical conversation, whatever you like to call it.
Sure. So right now you jump onto a call with me and I'm asking you, I'm going to assume you've been in other interviews with other people at the company. So the first thing I'm doing is I'm asking, do you need a break? Do you need water? Like, are you in a good state to start talking to me? That's the first thing I want to ask. Because if you aren't, and sometimes people go straight from one interview to the next.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that they're not antsy. Because someone there like with restless leg syndrome, that doesn't help anxiety one bit, you know? So then the next thing I'll say is like, hey, this interview is, I want it to be low pressure. I want it to be a conversation. I want to talk to you about some of your technical experience, what you know how to do, what you're trying to learn how to do. I don't want you to feel like this is under the gun, gotcha stuff. I'm not going to throw curveballs at you. That's not what I'm trying to do here. I want just to have a constructive conversation about technology and what this role entails that we're going to. So we have a half hour, or I'll say, if it's a half-hour interview, I'm going to talk for 20 minutes. And then I want to give you 10 minutes to ask me questions about the role. And I will say, and this is something I left off, it says a lot about a candidate who asks good questions.
Yeah. I
don't need you to know about me. I don't need you to know about the company. I want you to ask about the role and about what you're getting into. So that's what I'll basically, I won't say that in the interview, in this process. I'll say to you, hey, I want to talk to you for 20 minutes. And then for the next 10, or in the 10 minutes following is your time to ask me anything. Now, if you only ask questions for a minute, then we're in at 9 minutes short. But I'm going to assess what you're asking and what you're curious about at the same way that I'm asking you questions and you're giving me answers too. So then the next thing is, hey, can you bring up your resume? Well, usually I'll have a copy of the resume up, but if you could bring your resume back up on the screen. All right. So for this, in this situation, you've got a software engineer role. So if I'm interviewing you, I want to go right after the supersonic role because it's work experience. But what I actually want to do first is treat it like you don't have that role. I want to act like you are formerly director of technical recruiting and you've gone into a learning process, boot camp, self-learning, whatever. You've got 2 projects on the right side of your resume. So what I'm going to ask you is about reach out. So tell me in your project here, reachout.com, tell me one thing that you learned on, like, tell me about the project and tell me one thing you learned from it.
Yeah. So the simple version of reach out is basically you can schedule automated text reminders to reach out to family members, friends, whoever you add as a contact in there, right? Something, and it was built using JavaScript, Vue, and Rails on the back end. Probably one of the most interesting things was it was the first largish Vue application that I'd built. So it's primarily built in Vue. I didn't have very much experience in that before, but just using something outside of vanilla JavaScript or even jQuery, and actually using like a JavaScript framework was interesting and definitely a learning experience for me.
Why did you choose Vue?
Vue is what this project I did build through the Bootcamp, and that was what they had suggested. And I thought I was also interested in Vue for my time in recruiting, where I knew it seemed to be ramping up in Chicago a little bit,
Yeah.
maybe grabbing a little bit of the React market share. So I was also interested in it being a potential framework that was going to get more traction.
So you had never used Vue before. It was recommended that you use it. Vue is a good, I'm not asking because like, Vue is a great front end framework, by the way. But tell me, like, so what did you do to learn it? Like from day one, how did you go from not ever using Vue to I am pushing code to production, so to speak, with
Yeah.
Vue code, like a Vue framework?
Great question. I had one or two like kind of cheat sheets that I had found online that was basically how do you need to like display something, right? Like if I'm just trying to like get something on a screen, how do I do that, right? And some tutorials that I followed just to make sure I understood basics. And most of that was just following tutorials and then making changes based on what I needed to do, right? The This particular application reach out wasn't the most complicated thing in the world, right? It had to store contacts, it had to store reach outs, right? That those are both things that you created or user would create. And the more complicated part was getting it interacting correctly with Twilio for texting, right? But just getting it up and running was a lot of tutorials. And then I had a couple of people that basically I had conversations with, right? Of like, I'm stuck on this thing and it's been a day. I need to figure out how to do this, right? Can you help me with this?
So, okay, that's a really great next point. My next question was going to be, so did you just do all this by yourself? But tell me about the people you worked with. Why you worked with, why did you reach out to them, and how did you communicate with them? And how did you not use all their time?
Yeah. Yeah. I had basically a lead instructor who was there as a resource for me. I think my goal was always I had a longer time box. I call it time boxing, right? Where like I know I'm gonna try this issue for either X number of minutes or X number of hours before I'm going to reach out to some type of outside help, because I found most of the time I'll be able to get through it within that time period. And if I'm not, or if I'm not making any progress during that time period, then that's when I'm going to reach out, mostly to save the other person's time, right? Because I know every time I reach out to them, they have to drop whatever they're doing to try to help me, even if it's some simple thing. A thing I learned through this project was a lot of times as I would type out a message or talk through my actual issue, it would come to me and I'd be basically describing it. And I think that's, what is it? The rubber ducky
yes, totally.
thing in engineering. So I actually do that a lot now. If I'm stuck on something, maybe it's been half of my time box and I'm not making a lot of progress, I'll type out a whole message and then look at it and see, does anything come to me after kind of rereading it and vocalizing it?
Cool. So yes, it definitely works for many people. So you talked about the Twilio API as an extension of what you had Vue working with. Had you used Twilio before?
No, I basically was looking for a solution to be able to make text messaging work, right? The whole idea behind it was this would all be text messages that would go out rather than like emails or something like that, which are easier for me personally to ignore, right? So it was actually fairly straightforward. I think their API documentation is really solid, and then they had, if I remember correctly, specific like, here's how to get this running with Rails, right? So that was nice. It wasn't too difficult. There was certainly some confusion. I think this was one of my first time using a larger, or just like more of a like a kind of API as a service type thing, and it was just figuring out the documentation isn't going to copy and paste into my code. It's specifically what I'm doing. And just because the documentation is saying this is how you send a text message doesn't mean I need everything in the actual code example, right? I basically need this one piece that I know is going to send the text messages, and everything else I need to figure out what is the relevant parts for my code. So it was a lot of trial and error and basically sending 1,000 text messages to my phone until I got it working.
Yes. Oh, yeah, we learned Twilio the same way. But so along that line, how did you test an external API? Like, how did you go about running those tests? What did you use to get started with Twilio?
Yeah, I believe I was using Postman. Or was it Insomnia? It was some basically like REST service where I could send a request, right? I think Twilio as well had like a test account that I could basically force it to send some type of request. I'm trying to remember exactly what I was using, but I had a way where basically I could send the request to make it actually try to send.
You used a desktop or browser-based testing component to test the API. Yeah, I don't know. Both of those tools are great. Postman has mushroomed into this humongous, complex enterprise level tool, and Insomnia is kind of the answer of let's just go back to basics.
Yeah. But I think I use Insomnia, and that's like the reference point for people that don't know it. I always say it's like Postman, right?
Exactly. It's easier Postman. So what about Vue? I would say, where did you get stuck the most on this project? Where you're like, what did you beat your head against the table the most on?
Well, and this is, I think part of the reason I got stuck was it wasn't an anticipated issue, was I had to schedule, I don't know, it's kind of a mix between like a worker server almost and like cron jobs to have automated text messages that send out on a certain schedule. So that was something that like I had no knowledge of going into it, and wasn't even planning for going into it. I just thought, oh, it's easy. It'll send it once every, however many seconds, right? Without thinking of like, I have to have something that's storing these and making sure it runs on this schedule, and that server can't ever go down, or else everything goes down, right? And then it kind of deletes that request. So that was difficult. And I think probably the most frustrating part, because I could get it working, and then I didn't realize like I was hosting something on Heroku, and like that unless I had a specific worker server, it would go to sleep after a certain period, right? So everything would be fine, and then all of a sudden they'd all disappear. And it's not like I had an error message to tell me why. I basically had to trial and error, and then talk to a couple of people who are like, "Oh, this is what's happening." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So that was definitely the most frustrating part.
This might be the same answer, but what did you waste the most time on this project? In hindsight, you walk away and you're like, "Oh, I could have not done that at all."
To be 100% frank, if this still works correctly, this loading page, which was from a template, but getting it to work correctly with this text scrolling and customized took way longer than it needed to, and was way more complicated. This is some template that then I crammed into Vue. So this alone, and it's got this little kind of shimmy when you go around. And
so it's when copy pasta goes wrong. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically just trying to force something into it. A lot of the layout stuff, like I do a lot of this work now in my job of like more HTML focused and CSS focused stuff, but I didn't have a great grasp of it then. So like getting like some of these to change based on when I logged in seemed more complicated than some of the other stuff, because it was more like there was 100 ways to do it, right? Instead of some of, I don't know, the Twilio stuff. Once I found the solution, I'm sure there was other ways to do it, but it felt like, great, I understand this now. This is the right way to do it, right? Versus, do I write an if condition that's in the Vue logic, or do I write it, on the back end that's doing some type of check based off if they have a JWT or something like that, right? So that just was frustrating at times.
So now you going back to the folks you talked to, Was there any advice or recommendations that they gave you that you decided not to follow?
Yeah. Well, deploying this was interesting because in my naivety, I had basically made one GitHub project that had my backend and my front end, which was going to cause issues with Heroku the way that I was using it. So I got several answers on how to do this, and one of them was break this up into two separate repos. And I don't know, maybe I was stubborn, but I just said there has to be a better way or an easier way for me to not have to basically recreate all of this, or just to pull it over, right? Which just felt frustrating, and then would destroy kind of the commit history and having everything in one project, right? So I found a different solution, which is way more convoluted, right? Of like, basically I have to deploy everything to the public Rails folder before I push it out, and then I have to push it up on Heroku, which it's not the worst solution in the world, but it is definitely less straightforward and involves like 7 finicky steps that I have written down somewhere, and if I ever lost those, it would never get updated again.
But so in hindsight on that, should you have listened to that person?
I don't know. Probably. If this was something that I was working on regularly and I needed to push updates to regularly, certainly yes. Right. It is a hassle to update it, to push something live with this. And the most recent time I did it, I was like, I thought I had lost that instructions, and I was like, I'm just not going to be able to push this up. So yes, if I was updating it regularly. If I didn't want to do anything other than what it's doing now, no, it's not worth the time and the effort, but probably.
What's the one feature you didn't get to, but what did you kick out to get this delivered on time? What did you kick out that you wanted to do otherwise?
I did a very basic version of it, but I basically scaled it way down. I wanted to be able to have different things it would remind you to reach out about. So one of the fields in the app, I don't know if I can pull it up, but basically it'll show, it would give you the option to have like a suggestion to something to reach out about that you can create all your reach outs with. And that was my attempt to basically pull another handful of APIs in here. So if you see like this one, the topic is sports, right? So you can edit these topics to be jokes, news, or sports. I think the news and the sports basically just uses like a CNN or some news headline API, right? That will take the top 5 stories or take the top one that is labeled as sports, right? And then send that as part of the text, which is like, hey, you should reach out to them. Did you see this sports thing happen, right? And then the joke one is some shitty joke API that basically just says, here's a joke you can send them, right? That doesn't work like I wanted it to, right? Like I wanted it to be much better. Like it customized it. You can have a whole slew of different options, and like it does something other than literally just pull the first news story, the first sports event. That got scaled way back when I basically realized I have to finish this project, right? And that could be an endless amount of time that I would go adding more and more topics, right?
So testing is important to me and my teams, but this is a project. And even when I was teaching Bootcamp, we didn't really have testing as a big component. But how did you go about testing all your work? Like the answer can be manual. I'm just curious how you went about efficiently as possible testing that your code works.
Yeah, certainly manual. I think it's still something that I'd like to do more of, just to be in a role where I was doing testing regularly. It's still not something that we do in any type of automated or unit testing or anything, some type of actual framework. So a lot of this was, making changes, testing on my local environment, trying to have some type of, even if I just had screenshots, right, to review back on and go, did I mess anything up? And then once I had something that was actually live, obviously testing it live, but then at least that was my, okay, I know this is functioning correctly. And then when I would make local changes, I would try to do, I don't know if I could call it a full regression test, right, but some type of test and then checking based off of the live version to see if that if it's still operating the way that it should. And then once in a while, you push something up and you go, oh, this is not correct, right? So then figuring out how to revert it in an efficient way, I think, was also a frustrating thing for me, especially early on when I was like, I don't know how to revert a commit or how to revert a commit from Heroku, right? Like, it was a whole different thing.
So you did use Git for source control, GitHub?
GitHub, yep.
Any problems with that?
No, I think I got on the GitHub train early, and then I would say this one in particular has way more commits and pushes than it would ever need to. So I think my mindset was like, make a change, push a commit, right? Like it was probably too much, right? If there's 240 commits on a project that probably needs 50 tops, right? So,
but you're new to this,
yeah.
So like, I don't judge commits. Like, I wouldn't. This is just my advice to you as a candidate. Don't worry about that kind of stuff. Like, maybe you'll be more efficient as you get to be a senior, but even then, I've never had a discussion with senior engineers where I care how many commits did you make, how many lines of code did you write. So I would never that's just not a metric I would consider worthwhile worrying about. But to that point, like, you feel pretty comfortable with Git and GitHub and working with other people.
I tried to use branches on here as much as I could, making sure I was merging into master correctly. Again, there's things I would do differently now than I did then, but I think I was very deliberate around like trying to build it in a way that would be, I don't know, interesting to like, I could look back at it and actually make sense of it versus just pushing everything up in one commit. Right. And I certainly feel comfortable with it. Some of the more complex stuff, right, with Git is always, got to do a lot of Googling to figure out, double check, make sure I'm not destroying something. But I feel comfortable with it.
So Google, like, what are you using for your troubleshooting? Like, what do you feel like are your strongest resources for solving error message problems, trying to get something figured out, finding examples to kind of mimic for what you're trying to solve?
Yeah, good question. I use developer tools. I feel like I've gotten probably since this project a lot stronger with, right, of like actually being able to evaluate an error. And then something I wasn't doing a lot of then but do more now is doing the having the actual breakpoints, right, that you can add and tracking things along the way. That's helped me a lot when I'm trying to actually see like what is causing this issue, especially the more complicated something gets, of like, am I passing a null value when I think I'm not, right? So actually using breakpoints has been really beneficial recently. And then, Googling, I think the one recruiter thing that's helpful, using Boolean search string and search terms. Google evaluates, right, if you put quotation marks around things, or if you put minus in front of something, it'll search certain things or won't, right? It's something I was familiar with, so I think I'm fairly decent at searching error messages, and trying to do something based off of Stack Overflow and or I don't know, I make a decent amount of posts. Like, if I need help, I realize I can, like, that's what the community's there for. So it's one thing to search, but if it's not mission critical, and I know it's an issue that, if I started it in the morning and it's not immediately something that I need to solve, I can usually post something, go work on something else, and come back a couple hours later, and someone might have have a solution, right? Or they go, oh, it's this easy thing. So I actually will post on Stack Overflow or sometimes the Chicago Tech Slack too. If there's
Yeah.
something that I know someone knows how to do this, but I don't.
So here's a hypothetical. Reach out is your effort to have your own startup, but it makes no money. You get acqui-hired by my company.
Mhm.
And I say, hey, we're going to make Reach Out work. It's going to make some money. I'm going to give you 2 to 3 engineers on your team. What part are you taking of Reach Out that you're working on? And what are you going to have the other folks work on?
Great question. Are we assuming I'm in a more...
They can do whatever you need them to, but
Okay.
you're choosing on this from what you did, from your experience with Reach Out, whether it's skill based, enjoyment based, what you want to do in your career going forward. What are you going to do? What part are you picking to focus on?
Yeah. I think the first thing, if I was looking at this, I'm like, let's make some money with it. I want to put in a service where we have basically premium people. Like you can schedule up to 15 reach outs if you're a free user. To go above that, you're a premium user, and it costs $5 a month or whatever our pricing model would be.
So I'm not asking about features. I'm asking on the tech stack, front end, back end, DevOps, whatever. What are you working on for these new features?
I think that's where my interest lies is like, can I implement an actual payment processing system that runs through this and then has some amount of, like, I've worked with like a Braintree API before, right? Or the PayPal API. So can I integrate that into this? And I think the next logical thing in that is like, well, we need some type of accounts page and user page once we're at that level, right? So then building something that's more of an actual hub. Oh no. On reach out, I think I was talking about the PayPal. Basically, my goal would be let's integrate in some type of payment system, and that's work that I'm actually interested in, and that I wanted to do more of. And then there's some type of user accounts feature. Basically, just having an actual user page was something that I was interested in too, and that I would have done more of if I had more time.
Yeah. So that I honestly, we spent about 15 to 20 minutes talking about that one part of your resume. And at that point, I've made my assessment of you from that. Do you work like I would want the people on my team working? Do you understand the reality of engineering and problem solving?
Yeah.
Can you speak to what you liked to do, what you would do next? Like, I totally know if I want a front end specialist, you're talking more about API kind of stuff. So I'd probably steer the questions that way towards that front end stack. But truthfully, you elaborated, and everything that you said, I was able to kind of extract out the next question for. So that's, now I would definitely go after your project that you're working on with a real company as more relevant. But you just gave me everything that I needed to know about aptitude and attitude. You took advice from someone and you decided not to do it. That's fine. I don't need someone that just does what anyone else tells them. But you didn't also, what you didn't say was, yeah, this person had a stupid idea. You just said, well, they gave me a recommendation. I decided not to go down that path. If you talk negatively about people, that's an attitude thing that I'm really kind of keen on of, well, I don't know that their advice was overall wrong. It was just maybe not good for your situation. You spoke in a straightforward, that's something I didn't follow that someone gave me. That's an attitude thing. You did reach out for help. You acknowledged, maybe I shouldn't try to spend all my time doing this by myself. I'll reach out to the lead instructor. You talked about the tools you use, Postman. You talked about the testing. Man, it would have been better not to do it all manual, but that's all I had to do at the time. Like from from a school-based educational project, I got a full idea of how you would work on a software team doing business production stuff. Now, it's certainly on me as an interviewer to ask the questions the way I did, but every chance you get, what if you get a deadpan, no personality interviewer that isn't asking? What you have to be and what you have to do in your shoes is to say, what does this person want to know?
Yeah.
And if all you can do is provide them educational projects you did, you're trying to map everything you did on the educational project to real world business tech project. So it kind of like what I would recommend for someone in your shoes a little earlier in your process is take your projects and break them down along the lines of the questions I just asked you 20 minutes ago, so that you can elaborate. So you don't get stuck and go, well, I was just working on a Vue-based thing that talked to Twilio.
Yeah.
You got anything else for me? Because I need more than that. But maybe I'm not going to ask you the right questions. Maybe I'm just going to say, tell me about it. And that's as open-ended as I get. I don't want to leave it up to you as like from an interviewer standpoint. I don't want to put it all on you to know what I want to know. But I also know right now, if I was hiring for a full stack role or backend API interaction role or whatever, you are a candidate that is in the plus column of, I want more people on my team to interview him. Because you gave me a really good assessment of this education project you did, and I saw aptitude and the right attitude. I've had other juniors that talked about their educational projects just the way you did now, that also got to go to the next level through me, because they gave me this awesome assessment of how they can map what they learned here and what they did to scenarios in the real world business team. And that's what you want to be doing. Now, of course, I would ask, hey, do you have questions for me? And then I want you to be asking questions that your questions, you're going to ask questions, but they need to be indicators, things you're curious about that shows me you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And if you just say something like it's definitely cool to ask about team culture. I think I definitely like it when people ask me about, team culture stuff, but I also like when people say, what's your testing environment like? Like that tells me that you care about testing. If I haven't asked you about testing at all, and you're like, I want you to know I know about testing, when I give you the outlet to ask a question, I say, tell me about your automated testing. Tell me about your quality protocol, like how you do quality. Tell me about how you do deployments. Tell me about all the, that 10 minutes should be completely filled by you, by asking prodding questions that lets me know more about what you're interested in. If I didn't have the chance, maybe I'm a crappy interviewer and I didn't ask those questions, but that's your outlet to take advantage of that, to just kind of push more information about yourself and what you're interested in.
Yeah.
So if you said, if I didn't get around to asking you about API stuff and you are interested in Braintree payment APIs, you could say, hey, like, do you all use any APIs around payments, and what is it? Like, I might be like, that's an interesting question, but now I know this person has an interest in payment APIs. Okay, like, I don't need them to do that, but I do have other APIs I need them to do. So not utilizing that 10 minutes fully show like that is a huge gap in of opportunity for a candidate to shove more information about their background and knowledge and interests into the mind of the interviewer.
Yeah.
Plus, the more you talk, like every interviewer, I don't know a single interviewer that's really overly impressed with a really brief, is your company cool to work at type of thing.
Yeah.
Like that, like I understand the question. There's nothing wrong with asking. I definitely would ask, like I would ask about culture. Does this what are the values of the company? What are the values you put on your team? Definitely ask that stuff, because when an interviewer doesn't give you a good answer, you know, maybe not where I want to go.
Yeah.
But besides that, it is an opportunity for you to shove more information about yourself in front of the interviewer that they did not get to because of time limitations or the limitations of the interviewer themselves asking the right stuff. So I would make sure you're prepared on that level with good questions, or almost like ask rhetorical questions that show what you know things to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and you could even have a template of, this is what I have, is I just have an email that I pull up every time. Like, these are the questions I typically want to get answered when I'm interviewing with the company. If those get addressed along the way, that's great. And then I will also add specific ones. Maybe they mentioned something about this question, and then I can bring that up in my section and ask questions and go, oh, you mentioned so and so, but what does it actually, you mentioned you have an interesting or a great team culture, but what does that actually mean to you? Because I know culture can mean a lot of different things, right? And trying to dig in on something, and then that makes it a little bit more specific than just generic, questions.
It also shows you listen.
Yeah.
Like I'm not thinking it's not pure vanity, but there's an aspect to all conversations that you have with people where when they ask you to elaborate or to extend on something, it means they were listening to you in the first place.
Yeah.
So if you want to impress an interviewer, it's like you're paying attention. So if I talk to you about the team and I mentioned something about technology, and then later on you bring it up again, I'm like, oh, they pay attention. They actually care about what my team is doing. Doesn't mean, like, it's not disingenuous to just bring that up for the sake of bringing it up. It's just more of, hey, I'm listening and I'm wanting to know more about something you brought up earlier. There's nothing disingenuous about that. Now, if you truly don't give a rat's ass about technology and you keep on asking tech questions, there's a whole reason of why you're in the interview anyway. But the bigger point is that everything I did in my interview with you was to draw out little things you talked about and then say, extend on that, extend on that, extend on that. And you did. What makes me frustrated as an interviewer is when I say extend on that and I get one word answers, or the person can't. But the best candidates are folks that can take the question I give and give me at least 2 sentences to answer, to like elaborate on deeper experience for that project. Because every project, think about it, you've got 5 minutes to talk about this project, and the project itself was 2 to 3 weeks. You got a lot you can talk about. You fill that time. And if not, I'll bring it as a hopefully good interviewer. I'm going to work to extend it longer. And in most cases, if you've got 3 projects on there, we're not going to talk about one the whole time. Like reach out, we wouldn't go that deep in. But when I run into juniors that only have one thing, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm going to take advantage of the fact that if this person can take the 3 to 4 week project and condense it into 5 to 10 minutes of discussion, that's good enough for me to find out about aptitude. And I'm going to work it that way as long as they work with me. Like, if you're a good candidate with a decent interviewer, the goal is to make that 20-minute session work to show that no matter whatever experience you got, it fits what they're looking for. and that's what you're aiming for every time. So for us to talk about reach out only doesn't matter. But I would have gone after other things on your resume if we hadn't. But I felt like you gave me great answers that showed you could work on one of my teams on a problem-solving basis, communicate with others, take good advice, get rid of good advice, like perhaps without being condescending. You won't bang your head against a table for too long and waste your own time, but you also will be this is another thing you talked about. You will respect the time of the other people you would ask questions to.
Yeah.
You mentioned that earlier in there. It was a huge thing because I'm bringing you in as a junior and I've got seniors that are busy with code that I need them to do. I want them to help you, but I also can't have you monopolize the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Based on your answers, I'm like, I don't see a lot of risk with this person wasting my senior engineer's time. So those are all the kind of things I'm assessing to find out, are you a good fit, And again, this goes into what does this manager want from you? Your job as the junior and as the interviewee is to help them realize how you fit what they need.
Yeah. Which at the end of the day is the goal, right? They want you to be the solution, right?
Yeah.
I think that's always a thing to keep in mind.
Always. Now, of course, you could argue, well, what about when all I'm doing is FizzBuzz tests and algorithms and stuff? I'm like, exactly. You're right. Their interview process is not geared to judge that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem with those types of interviews, is that it's not. And in some way, I mean, I've totally turned down companies based on the fact that I interview with people and I'm like, based on what I just talked with them about, there's no way in hell they have any idea that I would fit with them or not.
Yeah.
I have no idea what they need. Like I've flat turned down substantial salary offers when I asked point blank, what do you all want me to do? Yeah. And they said, once we hire you, we'll figure it out when you're here. And I was like, I need a new job. I want the money, but this is a disaster waiting to happen. Absolutely. And it's harder. Like I'm in a position to be pickier. There's no doubt. But those are the type of things that you as a candidate need to look at. Am I setting myself up for success with this company based on how they hire and how they interview and how they bring people in?
Well, it's a two-way street, right? Interviewing is just as much you interviewing them as it is them interviewing you, right? Which is the hard part, right? You're really both trying to hopefully show your best cards. So
yeah,
great. Well, anything else you want to add or anything to plug, Randy, before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, I don't have anything to plug for what I do and work. The biggest thing for me to get to probably like teach people, I guess I want people listening that are not in the interviewer's position to look ahead when in 5, maybe less years, you're going to be in the interviewer's seat. Start to have empathy for the people you're interviewing. If you see a process that your company is doing that is unfair or more of a vanity thing to make the interviewees feel out of place, or try to become a change agent to make interviewing better for both sides, and don't just assume because you're in the seat now of I have to interview and be kind of subject to this crappy process. It's only going to get better if you work at it when you move up the ladder.
Yeah.
So listen to the podcasts like this one that teach you about how to get work and talk about the inefficiencies. And then when you move up, try to make the change yourself too. That means talking to your HR people and telling them the way we're doing this isn't fair, is biased, isn't really solving the problem. But after you make that complaint, be ready to provide an alternative. Like, be ready to say, this is how we should do it. And then live it. Like, do it. Like, it's not good enough to just tell other people to do things. Be teach and lead by example. So that's probably, like, this is one of those things of, it's not going to help you get the job now. We've talked about all the things about how to be prepared and stuff. The biggest thing I want to leave is that everybody listening now is a future person that can either make the process continue going like it always has, or they can improve it and make this industry a better, less biased, more fair way, less pressure, less tricks, less crap, to make it better for everybody that's trying to get work in our space. And that's what I would probably want to leave with people. Y'all are the future to make this work better. So
I love it. Be the change you want to see in the world, in your company, right? And your career. So, well, thank you, Randy. It's been a pleasure, a lot of fun, and people can find you on LinkedIn and anywhere else.
Linked, WR Burgess is pretty much the easiest way to find me online. If you type that into Google, I figure you'll find me. But LinkedIn, definitely from a business career standpoint, is where my profile is. Other than that, if you like good horror movies, Dark Sky Films. That's one of the key. That's my new company owns Dark Sky Films, and that's probably, there's some interesting titles in there, but if you're looking for good content, interesting content, I'd type that into the browser too.
Well, this will probably go live in maybe August-ish, so we'll be close to October. There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
Awesome.
Well, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for watching the technical interview portion of the Professional Technical Interviewee. If you want to tackle this interview question, you can find it at github.com/professional technical interviewee. New episodes are released on the first 4 Thursdays of each month. Find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Dorsett or on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. And remember, keep practicing.